Members, if we could have your attention. We will be moving to the ceremony. Members, if we could have you take your seats. We'll be moving to our special ceremony today on the floor. In honor of the 101st anniversary of the tragedy of the Armenian genocide, let me invite our colleague, Assemblyman Adrien Nazarian, to the rostrum to preside over the ceremony. Mr. Nazarian.
Thank you. We will move to file item number 62, AJR 34, by Mr. Achajian for the purpose of third reading. Mr. Achajian, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will read AJR 34.
Assembly Joint Resolution 34 by Assemblymember Shajian and others relative to the Armenian genocide.
Mr. Achajian, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present AJR 34, which will designate the year 2016 as the State of California Year of Commemoration of the 101st anniversary of the Armenian Genocide of 1915 to 1923, and make April 24, 2016, the State of California Day of Commemoration. AJR 34 will also call upon the President of the United States and the U.S. Congress to formally and consistently reaffirm the historical truth that the atrocities committed against the Armenian people constitute the genocide. Today, we pause to reflect on the lives extinguished and to remember the unspeakable suffering that occurred. AJR 34 will help direct a light on this dark chapter of our shared human history. The Armenian genocide carried out by the Ottoman Empire from 1915 to 1923 resulted in the deportation of nearly 2 million Armenians, and approximately 1.5 million of those deported were killed. I would not even have been born if my parents had not been fortunate enough to escape this persecution. My parents fled to Lebanon, where I was born and raised in a Christian household. There are still leaders in government who deny the Armenian genocide. There are those still who deny the Holocaust, the Cambodian genocide of 1970s, and the Rwandan genocide in 1994. When we debate about historical realities like this, we destabilize the present and dishonor the memory of those whose lives were taken. Only when we take an honest account of the past in the full light of the truth will we be able to lay a foundation for a peaceful and prosperous shared future. I applaud the views expressed by world and religious leaders who affirm this reality. The history and legacy of the Armenian people is marked by an indomitable spirit and a great resiliency in the face of the tremendous adversity and sufferings. Together, the American and Armenian people have forged a bond of common humanity. The state of California is stronger for the contributions Armenian Americans have made to our society, our culture, and our communities. It is with great respect that I present AJR 34 to this body. I ask us to stand with Armenians everywhere to bring a beacon of light on this dark chapter of our shared world history. As we recall the honor of the Mets Yerer, honor the memory of those lost, and affirm our enduring commitment to our sisters and brothers in Armenia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Levine, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. On behalf of the Jewish Caucus, I rise in support of AJR 34. As a legislative body, it is necessary and appropriate that we formally acknowledge and discuss the atrocities perpetrated against humanity throughout history. Today, we remember the Armenian Genocide. Through this recognition, we honor those whose lives were brutally taken, and we remember the first genocide of the 20th century. Genocide is the intentional act of systematically eliminating an entire culture, ethnic group, nationality, race, or religion. We only need to consider the words of Adolf Hitler as an example of why we must always remember the horrors of the Armenian Genocide. In 1939, Hitler justified the German invasion of Poland and the extermination of the Jews by saying, "Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" Members, today we speak of this genocide. We speak of this tragedy because remembering history helps to make sure that this history is never repeated. We must always remember the Armenian Genocide, and I ask for your aye vote on AJR 34.
Mr. Holden, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of AJR 34. As we remember the atrocities of a century past, we celebrate the importance of the Armenian people on our great state. As an assembly member of the 41st District, I represent many Armenian Americans who call California home. They are more than survivors. They are educators and leaders on issues of genocide, human rights, and social justice. I stand in solidarity with the Armenian community in their efforts to pursue truth and justice. While we remember, we celebrate the Armenian American community and their contributions to our greater humanity. Every one of us holds our heritage dear. It is when we come together that we grow stronger in reflection. I urge an aye vote on this resolution.
Ms. Garcia, you are recognized at your desk.
Members, I rise today proudly representing the 58th District that is home to a vibrant Armenian community that has been a great contributor to the rich fabric of my district. But I also rise as the Vice Chair of the Women's Caucus in support of AJR 34. With each passing year, we're learning more about the atrocities of the Armenian Genocide, but there's still much to learn. This is especially true when addressing the inhumanities faced by the Armenian women during the genocide that began over a century ago. The story of Armenian women is the story of those who didn't perish, but were forced to live the lives of shame and horror as they watched their fathers, husbands, brothers, and children die needlessly while they were left behind to live lives as sex slaves and forced to be wives of others. The suffering of Armenian women from the rape and the forced tattooing of the Turkish Muslim flag to their face and hands during the Armenian Genocide has been kept silent inside many families because of the ongoing shame that these women have felt for having been raped, violated, exposed, and sullied. The actions of the perpetrators did not only attack these women physically, but degraded and violated the very dignity and sanctity of their privacy. Among the 1.5 million Armenians who perished during the Armenian Genocide, the percentage of Armenian women who perished has never been researched properly. No accurate number is available. Armenian women suffered greatly. They paid a terrible price. It is our responsibility to stand as we are today to bring light to the history of all Armenians and the atrocities that fell to the men and the women 100 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Wilk, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the Armenian Legislative Caucus, I rise in support of AJR 34 relating to the commemoration of the 101st anniversary of the Armenian Genocide of 1915. In 2008, then Senator Barack Obama said, quote, "The Armenian Genocide is not an allegation, a personal opinion, or a point of view, but rather a widely documented fact supported by an overwhelming body of historical evidence. Behind these historical facts are real people with real stories that need to be told. Last year, I shared the extraordinary story of our family's great aunt Helen, who witnessed the killing of her husband, the starvation of her young children during a desert death march, and who was left for dead in a pile of corpses. But she survived and eventually made her way to America to be reunited with her two brothers. On November 30th of this year, I'll be leaving this august body, so this will be my last year to vote for the Armenian Genocide Resolution. So I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about my father-in-law, Ajaniq Safoyan. His family hailed from the Van region of historical Armenia. In fact, Vanessa, my wife, is named after the homeland of her ancestors. Ajaniq's family were fortunate enough to escape the genocide and migrated to Russia. Then came the Bolshevik Revolution, and the family once again was uprooted and they relocated in Tehran, Iran. At 18, Ajaniq came to America to attend Columbia University, where he registered at Ellis Island, and the immigration officer couldn't spell Ajaniq, so he asked him to take on an American name. Harry Truman was president at that time, so my father-in-law registered as Harry A. Safoyan. Like most immigrants, Harry had a deeper understanding of what it is to be an American than those born here. He loved Armenia and America equally. In fact, Harry immediately signed up for the ROTC program at Columbia, but had to be booted from the program 6 weeks in when they realized he wasn't a citizen. Harry eventually moved to Boston, where he earned a bachelor's from Boston College and master's and PhD in psychology from Boston University. Harry and his wife Alice shared a home on Bailey Road in Watertown, Mass. That became the launching pad for many Armenian Americans' experience as those friends and relatives who migrated to the United States got acclimated to American life and culture with the support of the Safoyan family. So despite the Turks' best efforts, the Armenian people not only have survived, but they have thrived. So I want to thank this body in advance for passing this resolution, but this is not enough. We need to ensure that our textbooks contain the historical facts of the genocide so other pogroms never occur again anywhere. I want to thank my friend and colleague from North Hollywood for bringing this to reality, working with our Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. Hopefully later this year, we'll have the opportunity to vote for AB 2650, which will require CalPERS and STIRS to divest from Turkey. Until the Turkish government accepts responsibility and acknowledges the crimes committed against the Armenian people, we need to do everything possible to bring closure to this blight on mankind. Last year, Vanessa and I marched with 130,000 people in the streets of Los Angeles demanding justice from the Turkish government. The collective pain and sorrow was something I'd never experienced before, and it was palpable as the cries for justice reverberated off the high-rise buildings. Despite the disappointment that we are now commemorating the 101st anniversary of the genocide, we stand resolute. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, quote, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." So I thank this body for its moral leadership on this issue, and I ask for an aye vote for AJR 34.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkian. Mr. Gatto, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it's been my distinct pleasure to serve with members of the Armenian caucus in this body, my colleague from Santa Clarita, my colleague from San Luis Obispo, and I think all of us heard the emotion in their voice when they gave their presentations. I know both men very well, and I know that these are tough men. They are guys who have made it in the hardscrabble world of politics. But hearing their emotion when they talk about this subject is one that I hear, an emotion that I hear countless times in my district when talking to the descendants of survivors of these horrific events. And it's really important that we understand that those emotions still run deep today. They run deep because we have a people who have been scarred by the acts of 101 years ago, and for 101 years have sought justice that we have marched for time and time again, we have voted for on this floor time and time again, and justice that we demand from the United States and from our own government in Washington and from Turkey. These stories are important to keep telling because as 101 years have passed, the people who can tell them from a first-hand basis are no longer with us. And it is incumbent upon all of us, people who care about the truth, to continue telling these stories. While the survivors might pass away, while the survivors might die, The truth does not die. The truth is out there, and it's something that is very important for all of us to commemorate. And by voting on AJR 34, that is exactly what we do. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Seeing no additional discussion or debate, Mr. Achajian, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and colleagues who all spoke in favor of AJR 34. I respectfully ask for unanimous aye support.
Thank you, Mr. Achajian. A roll call vote is required for this item. The clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Aye 76, no 0. Resolution is adopted. Mr. Achajian requests immediate transmittal of AJR 34 to the Senate. Without objection. We have many guests who have joined us for the Assembly's remembrance of the Armenian Genocide. Mr. Achajian, you are recognized at your desk for the purpose of introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the back, I have my wife, Roxy, my daughter, Nairi, and my sister, Margot.
Welcome. There's a couple more folks.
We don't have much time.
Do I just keep on going and introduce other folks who want to
Well,
recognize?
are they done taking pictures yet? I would keep going.
Okay. Mr. Gatto, you are recognized at your desk for the purpose of introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my distinct honor to have many guests here today. The one that I am profoundly honored by is the presence of His Eminence, Archbishop Hovnan Dadarian. Thank you very much for your wonderful remarks and for being here today. I also have several members in the back who I want to recognize. We have Greg Agoyan, we have Courtney Tusunian, Mike Khachadurian, my former staffer Christine Agakani, Harry Unel, Maria Yapremian, and Gerard Tusunian. If you will please stand and be recognized. And colleagues, if you'll give them a big round of applause. Thank you.
Ms. Olson, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to recognize several constituents here today as we remember the unimaginable and unspeakable atrocities of the Armenian Genocide. The members here today are with Turlocks Holy Cross Armenian Church. With us, we have Mr. Daniel Adenian. If you could please stand as I call your name. Ms. Helvina Gregorian, Mr. Gergen Garibian, and Mr. Rafi Garibian. Members, please join me in giving them a warm round of applause.
Colleagues, in the rear of the chamber are representatives of the Armenian National Committee of America. We're joined here by Chairwoman Nora Hovsepian, along with her board members, staff, and colleagues. Ms. Hovsepian, thank you for being here. Colleagues, I'd also like to take a moment to welcome the winners of the second annual statewide Genocide Education Essay Contest, Mr. Arvind Sarkisian, Mr. Josh Acosta, and Ms. Autumn McCullough. They're in the back. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized at your desk for a purpose of introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'd like to introduce Anush Hagusian, Gorgon Habashian, Levan Havanosian, Zapor Ohanesian, who's the supervisor of the Mesrobian School, Armen Savayan, Chris Sogutulu, Sogutlu, Michelle Teravandian, Razmig Sarkisian, and Teresa Yeremian, Government Affairs for the ANC.
Colleagues, at this point, I'd like to take the opportunity to also welcome all the other guests in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery. Thank you for being here with us. As we conclude our ceremony, just a few announcements. On your desks is a book, Historic Armenia After 100 Years. I'd like to welcome the author, who's in the gallery, Mr. Matthew Karanian. Please stand and be recognized. Also like to encourage our visitors, guests, and members to join us for a reception at the Eureka Room, which is located on the lower level of the Capitol, which will begin shortly after session ends. We will now, colleagues, if I can have your attention, please. We will now observe a moment of silence in remembrance of the 1.5 million people who lost their lives during the Armenian Genocide of 1915. This concludes our ceremony. We will take a brief recess to allow our guests to depart from the chamber. Members, do not leave the chamber. We have other business on file. Thank you.
Members, moving back to guest introductions, we have additional guests with us today. Mr. Bonta, you are recognized from Mr. Arambula's desk for your guest introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I'm honored and delighted to introduce retired Major General Antonio M. Taguba. General Taguba was born in Manila, Philippines, and joined the United States Army after graduating from Idaho State University. During his 34 years of service in the military, he served in numerous command positions up to the general officer level and was stationed in various placements including the United States, South Korea, Germany, and Kuwait. General Taguba has received multiple military awards and distinctions, including the Army Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, and many others. When General Taguba retired in 2007, he was only the second American citizen of Philippine birth to be promoted to the general officer rank in the Army. He is the founder and chairman of Pan-Pacific American Leaders and Mentors, through which he helps mentor and develop future Asian American Army leaders, and has been instrumental in the effort to urge Congress to grant a collective Congressional Gold Medal for Filipino and Filipino American World War II veterans. It is with great honor that I introduce Major General Antonio M. Taguba. Please join me in welcoming him. Thank you.
Members, the session schedule is as follows. Tuesday, April 19th, check-in session. Wednesday, April 20th, check-in session. Thursday, April 21st, floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed to retain. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Wilkes seconds that this House stands adjourned until Thursday, April 21st at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted.